Good morning, everyone. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for taking the time to be here. I have my colleagues, Representative Bollin, Representative Smit. It's a pretty disappointing day today for the state of Michigan. There was a deadline offered as a olive branch, frankly, to the Secretary of State to provide the additional information that has not been provided to us with regard to elections training materials that are used to train clerks, deputy clerks, elections directors in the state of Michigan. And that olive branch said, hey, we'll give you till 11 a.m. today to sit down and even have an opportunity to discuss some of the items that they believe are privileged or protected items. Whether we agree or disagree with that theory, we believe in the spirit of professionalism that we should do that, and so we did do that. And the response to us essentially was a letter that was returned to us this morning that basically said, no, they're not providing us anything further with regard to that. And they're certainly not going to take us up on the offer of setting down and working through these items. So that's a pretty disappointing thing. After all, the legislature is the body that determines how elections are run, the time, the manner, the place, the laws by which they're implemented. And Representative Smit, as chair of the Elections Integrity Committee, has not only the right, but the duty in that role to request the information that is used to train local clerks with regard to how they administer elections, because one of her primary roles, which then comes down further to the legislature, is to enact, amend, or repeal election law that is best suited and determined to be the right manner in which you would execute an election. I'll let Rep. Smit, when she speaks, get into the details of the process and what the timeline has looked like, but it's been more than accommodating, let's say, on the timeline. We have given them every opportunity to provide this information, and they've done nothing but stonewall. They have done nothing but push back and essentially say that we don't have the authority to do what we are doing. It's very clear, and I won't bore you necessarily with the dead details, but the Constitution provides us directly with the right to oversee departments, agencies within the state of Michigan to determine that they are operating within the laws of the state of Michigan. That is our original authority. They've also argued whether or not our subpoenas are valid. That's very, very clear. The law says very, very clear in MCL 4.541 that we have the authority to do this and that they are mandated by that statute to provide this information to us. And they have not provided this information to us. In fact, those positions have been upheld numerous times. There's an attorney general's opinion, and in fact, there's case law, which is Practical Political Consulting versus the Secretary of State from 2010, that says this: elections constitute the bedrock of democracy, and the public's interest in the purity of such elections is of paramount importance. If we cannot hold our election officials accountable for the way in which they conduct our elections, then we risk the franchise itself. We are simply trying to determine, is the Secretary of State's office administering elections in a lawful manner? If we are not provided the information to make that determination, I end up in a position that this is a lawless behavior. This is the Secretary of State essentially thumbing her nose at the institution, thumbing her nose at everything that makes our structure viable, proper, and clear, for that matter. So I believe at this point, and I've already started the process, we have no choice but to make a request of the full House of Representatives that they consider holding the Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, in contempt. I'm drafting that resolution now. I'm going to sign that resolution, and I am going to introduce that resolution, and I am going to make an argument for why she is outside of the law and has decided to disregard the requests not only of the Elections Integrity Committee, but now is that move to the Oversight Committee, in which we have the right to go into these types of things when someone is not operating within the law. I believe it is time that she is held in contempt of the House of Representatives, and I am going to make that request today, formally, of the House of Representatives. I would like, if you don't mind, Rep. Smit, to just talk briefly about the timeline and whatever else you may want.
Sure. Thank you. The three of us that are standing here today were at once all former clerks and had access to these training materials and information, like thousands of other clerks across the state and their staff that currently have access to these training materials. So what is the security risk here? It just makes us believe that what is it that the Department of State is hiding? The training materials, if there are such sensitive and protected information, then why can't the Secretary of State, Benson, explain to us what that is and sit down? We gave her the opportunity. I have been asking to have this since November 7th of 2023. It is nearly 7 months. We are still here without the information that we have been working with, being more than patient with her and her office, and we have no choice but to continue to go down what Representative DeBoyer has mentioned of having our colleagues consider the next step here. The public deserves to know that their elections are being properly managed, and it's also true that the legislature has the constitutional duty to determine the time, place, and manner in which elections are held here in Michigan. So because of this, we have the responsibility to oversee Secretary Benson to ensure that she is properly conducting elections here in Michigan. It is no surprise, Secretary Benson has been found by 7 separate courts to have unlawful directives and guidance over the last many years. So there's very valid and good reason here of why we need our hands on this training material. We have given the Secretary of State ample opportunity to come in, make her case for which she believes these materials need to be withheld. She is continuing to ignore us. She is continuing to stonewall us. She has also built her, and the department's, for that matter, core value on transparency. I don't know what transparency means to her, but instead she is completely obstructing our ability to ensure that she is properly conducting elections here in Michigan. That's where we're at. It's been nearly 7 months. This is unacceptable for a Secretary of State to not be working with the legislature and turning over manuals that thousands and thousands of clerks and their staff currently have. And so, again, thank you for your time. I do need to get over to prep for session today, and I am going to turn it over to Representative Bollin for her to add any further remarks and comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Smit. Thank you, Rep. DeBoyer. And thank you for being here. This is really an extremely, extremely important issue. As a former clerk and former chair of the Elections Committee, I really have to take pause. What is so secret about training documents? Many of these training documents or similar documents are actually available on the Secretary of State's website under the Election Administrator tab. So what is behind the cloak of secrecy in the e-learning center? There should be nothing. This is training. This is about certifying our election officials. And, it just leads me to believe there is something that is unlawful in that e-learning center, that improper directives have been provided to the clerks. And we found that as Rep. Smit mentioned, in previous court cases. I saw that as a legislator, some of the directives. This is not a new thing. Jocelyn Benson is a repeat offender, and going against what the laws are here surrounding our elections in the state of Michigan. It's happened time and time again. We need to stop. This is a fundamental responsibility of government to run elections. We have to stop the interference. And the best way to make sure our elections are at the highest level of integrity is to make them more transparent. A common goal should always be that every eligible voter can vote freely, secretly, independently, and safely. And I think that is a common goal. And unfortunately, we do have laws in place that we've seen them violated, and it is time to turn these documents over. It should not take up all of the air in the room. As Rep. Smit said, she's been asking for these documents for 6 months or more, and that we'll get back with you in the near future. What is the definition of the near future? I think the time is now. I will be voting in support of your resolution, Rep. DeBoyer, and I hope that we can see some very swift response from the Secretary Benson, and yet she wants to be the governor of our state. No. Thank you.
We're open to questions if you have some. Yes.
Are you concerned at all that Benson is scheming to just run out the clock?
I won't speculate, I guess, but I would say that in my brief history here in Lansing, that is definitely a tactic that I've seen used by departments and administrators to just prevent having to provide information. And the issue with that simply is, what kind of government do we want for the people of the state of Michigan? Running out the clock, at some point, as Rep. Bollin had said, at some point you have to wonder what it is that's going on that they don't want you to know about. And unfortunately, human nature is such that it goes to perhaps the worst possible things.
I want to add something about, running the clock out. What is the purpose of running the clock out? Other than we're going to disclose something that actually is pertinent to our work in setting the time, place, and manner of elections. But this is about the people. The people in the state of Michigan deserve to have this transparency. They deserve to have confidence in their elections. They have the right to know. As a former clerk in the e-learning center, while it was very clunky, I will tell you what I suspect is there are maybe some NDA, non-disclosure agreements, maybe some of these grant agreements that we've been trying to get more information on. The third party Zuckerbucks, if you will, in past years. I've heard from clerks over the years about the lack of transparency and how odd it is that you can't even keep a copy of your transmission of what you're submitting for a grant reimbursement for these. Why the secrecy? And we can only conclude that it's something to hide, and it is unfortunate we have to take this step, but it is within our right, and hopefully maybe this will get our attention.
Yes.
What comes after? So you're introducing this resolution today. Presumably it will be adopted by the House. What comes next?
Every legal tool that lays on the table could come next.
Tell me what those are, because I don't know.
The reality is you have everything from litigation, which I think is probably a strong possibility. But what a sad day for Michigan if that's the case. That we have to go to litigation to have the Secretary of State's office provide us with the information that by statute and by Constitution we're entitled to have. Like, this is a continued demonstration of lawlessness. I happen to be a clerk as well in 2020 when Jocelyn Benson told local clerks to not worry about signature verification on return absentee ballots. This is a continual it's I'm going to make the rules, I'm going to do as I see fit, and you guys who have oversight and legislative authority, I'm not going to listen to you. This is a continual problem. And the fact that we have to perhaps go to court what a shame for the people of the state of Michigan.
Let's go back to some of the previous years in the 2020 election, it being the most secure. How would we know that if we don't understand were people properly trained? The signature is a good example, and I want to illustrate about the signature directives that we're giving. It is the responsibility of the clerk that you're checking the signatures, you're checking an absent voter application when they come in against your voter roll and the signature on file, and then you send the absentee ballot out, you're checking it again. You go through a series of checks to make sure that you're generally looking for very similarity in the previous signature, the signature you have on file, and people that it's similar to all the signatures they presented. So, for example, I signed my name, Ann Bollin. If it came back as A and B, that would raise a flag for a clerk. Like, was it Ann Bollin that signed this? Was it somebody else? The directive was so broad and so vague and so disruptive to the process that it was really hard to tell. But basically, there's no signature verification. Since then, she's gone in and got the rules changed. But I think we have to illustrate just how extreme that directive was in the 2020 election.
Representatives, it's clear that this is a part of your oversight function to request this information and do what you're doing now. But what would you say to those who would say that Jocelyn Benson is a front runner for the governor race on the Democratic side, that this might be perceived as a political move? How do you combat that perception?
It holds absolutely no water. She very well may be the front runner. But I'm going to tell you right now, if a Republican clerk was behaving in this manner, Secretary of State was behaving in this manner, I would have the same opinion. This is how powers and duties and checks and balances are created in the state of Michigan. This is how it is supposed to work. We represent the people. We have the right to do oversight. We have the right to request documents, and there's no provision in law that says they don't have to provide them to us, although she is now not providing them to us. I can't see it any other way but lawless. No respect for the process, no respect for the institution. Essentially, I'm going to do what I want to do, when I want to do it, and you have no authority over us on this. That's very disappointing, regardless of your party affiliation. So that is the claim that will probably be made, but the truth is that the facts will demonstrate otherwise. We are legitimately asking for things we are legitimately entitled to. So take your political talking points and do whatever you want with them. That's not what's happening here.
Can you walk us through the logistics of how this works? Like, does this require a record roll call vote? When will it be taken up? What happens after that? Like that sort of thing?
We're introducing it today. In fact, I think it just walked in the room. Did that just come out? Get in? So, thank you. Appreciate it. Give me 1 second.
May I co-sponsor that?
Absolutely. Thank you. Mind getting? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So, I'm gonna make a request that it be brought up today. As far as the floor details of that's beyond my scope of authority on how that's going to happen. But I'm going to ask it to be brought up today, because I don't think we deal with lots of things as legislatures, right? But when you're directly attacking the structure of the institution and the integrity of the institution, I think you need to deal with it immediately. And I think that if I can convince the powers that be that we will take this up today, that I'll be happy about that, and I think it will be a good thing. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Is there a whistleblower component to this? If a clerk anywhere feels that the directives they're being given or the manual they've been handed has things that would work against the law, that they should come forward?
I will tell you, as a former local clerk, it's very difficult. The clerk's job, it shouldn't be difficult to come forward, but it is a matter of timing, right? You are within this window of time in your election administration and pre-election activities. Some are post-election activities. They're time sensitive. You're very limited. To get approval and take it, one, you need cooperating prosecutors, but you also need to get to your own legal counsel, your own township board, your city council, to be able to advance this. And clerks make it work. The local clerks are the ones that are, boots on the ground, making this happen every day. And so it's a very difficult position. But I have had local clerks come to me in back post-2020 election and very, very concerned, even pre-election, the 2020 election, about how these changes were being made, these directives were being made. And we saw it very, very early on in Benson's tenure in 2019. So honestly, while it's disappointing, I guess I'm not really surprised. It's really an example of very failed and false leadership.
Very true.
Can I follow up a little bit more on the process?
Sure.
So, asked to be adopted today, it is a resolution. Those are, of course, non-binding. Maybe Benson sees the resolution and is like, oh my gosh, yes, I would love to respond to your subpoena. Maybe, probably not. Litigation, would the litigation be a court order compelling Benson to comply with the subpoena, or what exactly would the balance of that look like?
Yeah, so I am not an attorney, so I'll put that disclosure out there. But my belief from being around these types of things that there would be perhaps a request for a writ of mandamus, compelling her to provide these things because the law is very clear that she shall. And so she has an obligation to provide that. Now, again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm sure there's a lot more components to it than just that. But that's where I think this should be headed. I know that Representative Smit has a role as Elections Integrity Chair, but I have actually a very different role as the Oversight Chair. My role is to be certain that the state and its departments and agencies are operating in the manner in which they should be operating. And currently, the Secretary of State's office is not operating in the manner in which they should be operating. And I think this is a continual demonstration over the last few years of the Secretary's tenure. We've just seen that there was a violation issued on the campaign finance. That it was definitely a violation of that campaign finance. I'm going to be interested to see if Secretary Benson does the right thing and the ethical thing, which is to refer it back to the Attorney General's office to be dealt with from the angle of the Attorney General. That'll be interesting. That'll be a telling moment of what her integrity level is, because it's clear that a violation occurred. We've had the case recently of the failure of the financial disclosure that the legislature had darn near unanimously voted to pull that away from the Secretary of State's office and reestablish it in a different manner. So, one or two things, everybody makes a mistake here and there, but they continue to pile up, and then when you have something as glaring as the Oversight Committee issuing a subpoena because you won't comply and you just continue to thumb your nose, that's a pattern. And if you're in the investigating world, they would call that a clue. And so that's where we are right now with the behavior coming out of that department. Anybody else? Yep.
Rep. Bollin, I wanted to ask kind of an off-topic question, excuse me, but it falls in the vein of the transparency. Just to follow up on the House Probes meeting from yesterday on House Bill 4420, we've seen both Republicans and Democrats use those earmarks in a way that have raised eyebrows in the past, and it's clear that you and Rep. DeBoyer here are committed to stronger transparency, oversight, but money in politics and doing favors for your associates is kind of addicting. It's kind of it's easy to get at and fall back on. So, without these rules codified into law, is that what the fear is here, that it would be easy to just go back to the way that things were before?
I'm not a predictor of the future. What I want to be is an assurer of the future, and that's why we want to put it in statute. This is, to me, it should be the normal practice of this institution. It's not been. I think we've been through very unprecedented times with the budget, with all the manna or COVID money coming from Washington. And we have to rein it in. This should not be a who-you-know game. This should be what you know. What is better for Michigan, what protects the public's health, safety, and welfare, and what is constitutionally required, statutorily, what's court-ordered, priority, and what's a preference. These are not our dollars to spend, they're your dollars to spend. We need to be thoughtful. It honestly is unfortunate we need a statute to do it, but I do think it protects the institution, the people of Michigan moving forward.
If there's nothing else, that's it. Thank you guys.